least a prophet of his God, the God of science, and that he's a spokesman that should speak with authority on that science. Of course, she's a crackpot. I would just make, well, let me do the next slide before I make any other comment. This is the whole concept of the mind of a technocrat and the mind of a transhumanist. They're both rooted in scientism. It's a fatal error to equate scientism with science. I am not anti-science, and I know none of you are either. But do not equate scientism with science. True science explores the natural world using the time-tested scientific method of repeated experimentation and validation. By comparison, scientism is a speculative, metaphysical worldview about the nature and reality of the universe and man's relation to it. We wonder, some of you I've known and followed for years, like Willie Soon, great debunking information that he's put together on global warming for a very long period of time. You wonder why all of the good science that's been put forth to rebut global warming has never rebutted it. Great work's been done. I remember that one study a few years ago where 30,000 scientists and engineers and people signed this big petition and stuff to say, this is nonsense. And, the global warming crowd just threw it in the trash, basically. Said, we're going to ignore that. It's not true. We don't care who you are. We don't care how many PhDs you got. We don't care what university you work for or how many years you've had in grade and field. We're not going to listen. You're just irrelevant to us. You see, they threw the whole thing out because it's a religious proposition, not a scientific proposition. And we're right now experiencing the very same thing with this great panic of 2020 and the pandemic. Same exact MO, where your science is immaterial. You can debunk this whole thing until the cows come home, but it will not cause them to budge because they are engaged in a religious proposition and you are engaged in a scientific proposition. And you cannot trump their religion with science, with real science. It won't happen. So they will continue to throw the good science out with the bathwater, the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And it's going to be a tough slog. I suggest that at least that we need to figure out another angle of attack, at least a complementary angle of attack, maybe to complement the good science that will actually derail their crazy religious proposition. Let me take you back historically a little bit to 1994. You remember Agenda 21 was produced in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro by the UN conference. It was called the UN Conference on Economic Development, UNCED, UNCED. And two of the participants in UNCED, in the Rio de Janeiro conference that produced Agenda 21, two of them were kind of the environmentalist scholars of the original sort, and they went and participated in all the high-level mucky-muck conferences and stuff they had in Rio. And they came away from it greatly disturbed. So disturbed, in fact, it took them 2 years to write a book. It's called The Earth Brokers. If you've never gotten it, I think you still find it somewhere, a rare bookstore, maybe a used bookstore, who knows. But it was written by Finger and Chatterjee. And they were critical of the entire process of Agenda 21. They said basically it was a fraud. I'm going to just show you a couple of quotes from their book because it's very revealing indeed. This is one conclusion, first conclusion that they made. We argue that UNCED has boosted precisely the type of industrial development, I parenthesize technocracy, that is destructive for the environment, the planet, and its inhabitants. And haven't you heard this today? This is exactly what you heard from Paul Dreesen, for instance. You heard it from whoever came right after him. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. But that's exactly what it's destructive of the environment. I thought it was going to help the environment. I thought it was going to make things cleaner, better, more efficient, whatever. Just the opposite has happened. Then he goes on, they go on and say, we see how as a result of UNCED, the rich will get richer, the poor poorer, while more and more of the planet is destroyed in the process. Just process that for a minute. All of the promises of nirvana, of utopia, of Green New Deal, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to save the world. We're going to save humanity too. We're going to save humanity. We're going to save the infrastructure of the world. That's a word that's being thrown around a lot today. We're going to save everything. Science is going to win out in the end, and you'll see science will save everything because we, the scientists, declare it. That's what Agenda 21 is all about, the agenda for the 21st century. And he says, nope. They said, nope. The rich will get richer, the poor poor, while more and more of the planet is destroyed in the process. Has this actually been what's happened since 1992? It's exactly right. I mean, you just hardly can't say, well, it's just coincidence. No, it's not. That was the policies they set. These guys saw through the policies. They said, yeah, we heard what they said, but then we found out what they meant. And what they mean is they're going to do these things in the name of saving everybody, but the rich are going to get richer, the poor are going to get poorer, and while more and more of the planet is destroyed in the process. So they noted, the convention implicitly equates, you got to catch this, implicitly equates the diversity of life, animals and plants, to the diversity of genetic codes. By doing so, who's ever heard of diversity, by the way? Biodiversity. Is that name? Have you ever heard that in the news story, a report somewhere? I mean, you all should. Okay. Diversity becomes something modern science can manipulate. You with me here? It promotes biotechnology as being essential for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. What? Nobody ever put that in the newspaper. Nobody ever wrote about it. It just stuck as a little footnote in this. Well, it wasn't a footnote, but I mean, it was in the text. Biodiversity concerning the diversity of genetic codes. They understood that even back then. This was before the human genome was mapped, you understand. Diversity becomes something modern science can manipulate. This is what they were talking about in the discussion groups that led to Agenda 21 and the Biodiversity Convention. There was more that meets the eye, even back in 1992. Now, this will kind of be interesting to you. He went on and said, the main stake raised by the Biodiversity Convention is the issue of ownership and control over biological diversity. Okay, that means you folks. That includes you. They've already cycled through seeds and plants, Monsanto, right? Bayer. They've already cycled through animals now. They're cloning animals. They're genetically engineering animals. They're growing organs for humans and animals. So the animal kingdom has been engineered, or at least the beginning stages of engineering. The last frontier for these people today is the human population of the planet. Genetic codes, manipulation. The major concern, listen to this now, yellow. The major concern was protecting the pharmaceutical and emerging biotechnology industries. Just let that sink in. I read this before, probably a few years ago, and I did not see this text because it meant nothing to me. When the great panic of 2020 hit, I was noodling around in the book again, just looking for some quotes that I'd highlighted and stuff to see if they were of interest, and I ran across this text. It wasn't highlighted. I immediately highlighted it, right? And I marked it, and I put, arrows and everything else at it. They saw this back in the discussions in 1992 at the United Nations. The major concern was protecting the pharmaceutical and emerging biotechnology industries. This was the takeover, folks. This was the beginning of the end of the takeover. They're preparing, if you will, for the takeover, introducing transhumanism, which is a manipulation of genetic material and life. Oh, wait. The issue of ownership and control. I'll let you think about that yourself. I don't need to comment. Well, maybe I will. We're talking about intellectual property here. if a certain gene is ever introduced into your body that's not yours initially, but somebody else engineered it, created it, and shoots it into you, who owns that gene? Who owns you now, possibly? I mean, there's some serious ethical questions here that these guys have already been thinking about, but we haven't been thinking about them.